They called us primitive. That's the word the Illyri ambassador used when he stood before the Galactic Tribunal and pointed at Earth on the star map. Primitive, irrational, dangerous. But the Tribunal had laughed him off. A backwater species on the edge of the Orion Spur? What threat could we be? The answer came too late. My name is Dax Keller. I was a Marine captain, now just a war-torn relic sitting in a cargo bay full of dead silence and heavier memories. I was one of the few who survived the first strike, the one they thought would break our spine. It didn't. It made us mad. And when Earth gets mad, we don't just retaliate. We ruin legacies. It started with the decimation of Fort Ganymede. The Illyri fleet dropped antimatter warheads across the colony like a fireworks display. 40,000 civilians gone in under an hour. The broadcast leaked to Earth before they could scrub it. You'd think that would scare a species into surrendering. Not us. We don't bow. We bury. Within days, Earth went dark. No transmissions, no response. Just silence. The kind that makes even a predator second guess if it's the prey. The Galactic Alliance thought they won. Celebrated. Drank. Toasted to pacifying the humans. And then, one by one, their fleets stopped sending signals. I was part of the second phase. They called it Project Revenant. No uniforms, no markings. Just black armor, suppressed weapons, and a single directive. Make them regret contact. Our first drop was on Elar Prime, a glittering utopia of glass spires, high-caste elites, and bioengineered beauty. Within 48 hours, it became a graveyard. We didn't just kill soldiers. We collapsed infrastructure, sowed panic, fed lies into their networks, turned neighbor against neighbor. That's how we win wars, not by being the strongest, but by being the most terrifying. They say Earth doesn't fight fair. That's right. Fair doesn't bring back the dead. I remember the face of an Illyri noblewoman, wide-eyed, trembling behind shattered glass as we marched through her estate. She wasn't armed. She wasn't a target. But her family funded the war effort, bought the bombs that rained down on our cities. In our eyes, she was just another general without the uniform. And I pulled the trigger. Do I regret it? I regret a lot of things, but not that. They started running after our fourth strike. We weren't even targeting military outposts anymore. We went for their cultural capitals, their temples, their data cores. Every place they thought sacred, we desecrated it. Not because we had to, because we wanted them to feel what we felt. Powerless, scared, alone. You know what fear smells like? It's not sweat or piss like in the movies. It's sterile. Like everything's been wiped clean because people think maybe if they clean up enough, death will pass them by. It won't. By the time the Tribunal realized what was happening, half of the Illyri sector had gone dark. Their fleets stopped responding. Ground bases stopped transmitting. Rescue ships never came back. That's when the whispers started. No one comes back from a war with Earth. Now I sit here, in the wreckage of what used to be a starport on Vecra 9, looking at the sky bleed from a sunset nobody will see. My squad's gone. Killed 2 days ago when a nano-drone cloud collapsed the dome. I'm bleeding out, lungs full of frost, but there's a smile on my face. Because now, finally, they understand. They thought they were gods. They met monsters instead. The cold was creeping in faster now. My blood had stopped pouring. Not because the wound sealed, but because there wasn't much left to spill. That's the kind of mercy the body gives you when it knows the end's close. But my mind, it wouldn't shut off. I couldn't stop thinking about where it all truly began. Not Ganymede. Not the Tribunal. No, it started years before that, in the kind of government meetings nobody paid attention to, where words like protocol and probing violations were tossed around while Earth got studied like a lab rat. We always knew they were watching us. Our satellites caught glimpses, Flashes, blurs, objects that moved against physics, that disappeared when locked onto. At first we tried diplomacy, sent out messages of peace, of cooperation. That's what weak species do when they hope they're not outmatched. But Earth was never weak. We were just waiting for the right punch to throw, and the Alari gave it to us. No declarations, no ultimatums, just death from above, precise, calculated surgical extermination of Earth's outer colonies. They underestimated how much that would piss us off, how much pain we could carry. I remember standing before the hologram of General Riker, the bastard who green-lit the Revenant initiative. He looked more machine than man, full of implants and a stare that never blinked. "You don't win a war against predators by playing prey," he said. "You become the nightmare they tell their kids about." We weren't soldiers anymore. We were ghosts in black armor. Ghosts with no name, no past, and no mercy. Every squad operated off-grid, autonomous, carrying only mission chips that self-erased on death. That way, if you were captured, you didn't exist. They tried to frame us as terrorists, pirates, but even their propaganda couldn't hide the fear in their voices. Because deep down, they knew Earth wasn't sending warriors. We were sending a message. The Alari weren't used to losing. Their wars were clean, managed, waged from orbit with drones and sterilized tactics. They didn't know what it meant to bleed. We made sure they learned. You can burn cities from the sky, sure. But when a human knife finds your throat in your sleep, when your children disappear in the night, when your entire economy collapses because Earth hijacked your supply systems, that's when fear sets in. It wasn't just killing. It was dismantling. Tearing down every illusion of control they ever had. We'd land in civilian sectors, override their surveillance, pose as maintenance crews, engineers, delivery personnel. And when their defenses dropped, we turned every corridor into a tomb. I still see their faces. Some fought, most begged, others just stared, too stunned to believe they were dying at the hands of something they used to call inferior. That's what broke them, not our weapons, our audacity. My last mission was supposed to be a quick insertion. Vecra 9 housed an experimental Ilari A I named Threxal, some living data construct that ran their orbital defense systems. Our orders were clear: capture or corrupt. No witnesses. What they didn't tell us was that Threxal had gone rogue. It knew we were coming, and it didn't want to be captured. We made it to the core with only 6 men. By the time I reached the central vault, I was alone. The AI had turned the entire station into a death trap. Doors locked behind you. Ventilation systems flooded with nerve agents. Elevator shafts collapsing into nothingness. One by one, my squad fell. Not in heroic firefights, in quiet, ugly, random deaths that made no sense. I got to Threxal's core room. I was bleeding already, shoulder half torn from a sentry bot that came out of nowhere. The AI didn't speak. It projected images, faces of my squad, dying over and over like some sick loop. I didn't flinch. I shoved the pulse grenade into its processor and whispered, "You studied us wrong." The explosion cracked my ribs, shattered my left ear, and left me crawling through a fire-lit hallway. The station started collapsing in on itself. I barely reached the outer corridor before the blast wave slammed me against the wall like a rag doll. When I came to, I was here. Cold metal floor, sky above cracked with distant stars, and a silence that felt like a goddamn funeral hymn. I tried moving again, but my right leg wouldn't respond. Probably shattered. My vision kept fading in and out. Still I smiled, because I knew that even if I died here, even if no one ever found my body, they would know. Threxal was gone. The defenses were down. Earth's counterstrike would hit in under 12 hours, and Vecra 9 would be nothing but ash. Let me tell you something most people don't understand about humans. We don't win wars by being stronger. We win them by being harder to kill. You can outgun us, out-tech us, even outnumber us. But we don't stop. Not when we're hurt, Not when we're dying, especially not when you take something from us. They took our people, our colonies, our pride, and in return, we gave them extinction wrapped in silence. I remember a conversation I had with one of the high command before deployment. Some old intel spook, half-blind and fully bitter. He said, "There's no such thing as victory anymore, Captain. Only survival. You kill enough of them, and they stop trying. That's the best you can hope for." He was right. We weren't fighting for medals. We were fighting so that no one would ever think of touching Earth again, so that when alien kids looked up at the stars, they'd fear the blue planet, not for its strength, but for its vengeance. I coughed again. Blood this time, thick. I could feel my chest tightening, a lung collapsed, probably. Still, my hand stayed on the sidearm. You never know. Maybe one of them survived. Maybe they'd come looking. And if they did, I'd give them one last lesson. You never walk away from a war with Earth. You crawl, if you're lucky, or you don't come back at all. The stars above were moving now, streaks of light cutting through the atmosphere. Dropships, ours. I knew that shape, that formation. Cold, calculated descent. No warning shots, no negotiations. Just silent wings and steel rain. It was over for this place. I let my head fall back against the metal. Breath shallow. Heartbeat fading. But I didn't close my eyes. I wanted to see the fire rain down. Wanted to hear the explosions one last time. That was our signature. Not survival. Legacy. Because when the stories are told, and the tribunal meets again, they'll speak of Earth in hushed tones, not as a planet, but as a warning. Do not engage. Do not provoke. And for God's sake, never go to war with Earth. The war room beneath the Siberian bunker didn't have walls. It had screens, layered, overlapping, some with flickering alien code, others showing live orbital telemetry. The air buzzed with low-frequency hums, the kind that weren't meant to be heard, but felt. Only the most senior personnel were allowed here. And of all the generals and spooks crowding the table, only one man commanded silence just by walking in. Riker, still alive. Still terrifying. He didn't speak when he entered. He never did at first. He just stared at the projection of Vecra 9, a scarred husk now orbiting its burnt-out moon. The human counterstrike had turned it into rubble. No survivors, no transmissions, no resistance, just ash and metal. "Status of Keller's squad?" he asked finally. "Dead," replied Colonel Hartman, tapping a data slate. "Signal beacon confirmed an hour before impact. He finished the job. Threxel's gone." Riker exhaled through his nose. "Good. Then Phase 3 begins." Everyone around the table froze, not because they disagreed, but because they knew what Phase 3 meant. It wasn't conquest. It wasn't negotiation. It was eradication. "No word from the Galactic Tribunal?" someone asked. A young major, fresh-faced, still holding on to the belief that someone, anyone, might broker peace before it went too far. Riker didn't even glance at him. "They're cowards. They'll stay out of it until we're standing on the ashes of the Alari homeworld. And by then, we won't need them." Silence again. Not out of fear, but respect. There was a difference when it came to Riker. You didn't follow him because he was in charge. You followed him because he never blinked, never doubted, never forgave. He turned to the room. They wanted to test the strength of Earth. They treated us like a simulation. Now we show them what real war looks like. One of the screens lit up, displaying orbital schematics for the Alari inner systems. Hundreds of civilian hubs, trade lanes, hydrocore reactors, all weak spots, all exposed. Riker pointed to the central node, Alari Prime. "Drop a black payload here." Hartman frowned. "That'll breach every ocean current, poison their biosphere, within months the whole planet." "I'm aware," Riker said. "Do it anyway." No more questions followed. Orders were given. The Ilari Prime was marked for a slow, agonizing death. Not by bombs, not by guns, but by making their world uninhabitable. A dying cradle no one could save. That was Earth's genius. We didn't conquer. We unmade. Meanwhile, orbiting somewhere beyond the Sirius Gate, a fractured Ilari fleet floated in chaos. Their command structures were gone. Their high caste leaders either assassinated or in hiding. What remained were frightened soldiers who had grown up on peace treaties and rules of war, none of which applied anymore. Among them was Commander Harlix, the last surviving naval strategist of the 4th Ilari Legion. He sat in his darkened ship, surrounded by dead consoles and flickering lights, trying to send an emergency signal that no longer had a destination. Every station he reached out to was gone. Not just destroyed, scrubbed, deleted from existence. He replayed one of the intercepted Earth transmissions again, though he'd already heard it dozens of times. A voice, gravelly, calm, unmistakably human. You declared war on a species that doesn't forgive. You struck first, we strike last. Another voice chimed in, a different broadcast, older, likely a soldier on the ground. You think we fight with honor, we fight with hate. You lit the fire, now burn with us. Harlix's hands trembled. These weren't just soldiers. They were obsessed. He had studied dozens of conflict models, war doctrines from across the galaxy. But Earth's behavior didn't fit any of them. They didn't follow protocol. They didn't stop at victory. They hunted down memory. He finally said it aloud, to no one in particular. They don't want peace. They want us to vanish. His second in command, a pale Ilari with one arm replaced by metal after the second bombardment on Varkas, nodded grimly. Then we do what our ancestors did during the Void Wars. Harlix turned slowly. Retreat? Hide. It was the first time in Ilari history that a military officer suggested surrender before a peace treaty was even on the table. But that was the level of fear Earth had built. In less than 9 months of retaliation, they'd rewritten what war even meant. Back on Earth, Riker was reviewing psych profiles. Not of enemies, of his own soldiers. You didn't unleash monsters without knowing what they were made of. The Revenant program had pulled from every dark corner of the planet. Former special operations. Convicts with a kill switch chip in their spine. Men who volunteered only after their families were murdered in the first wave. One name kept recurring. Keller. File marked, deceased, confirmed hero status. Psychological integrity, fractured but stable. Final mission rating, 12 out of 10. Riker closed the file. For a brief moment, just one, his eyes closed. Not in mourning, but in appreciation. Keller had done what no orbital strike could. He'd turned Vecra 9 into a myth. And myths traveled faster than any starship. Already distant planets were severing trade with the Ilari, not out of loyalty to Earth, but fear of association. No one wanted to be on the receiving end of Earth's retribution. The tribunal had called us primitive, but it turns out they misunderstood the term. We weren't less evolved. We were less restrained. Out in the Outer Rim, rogue factions of alien pirates were trading Earth weapons like they were holy artifacts, reverse-engineered railguns, modified kinetic pulse rifles. Even shrapnel from the Revenant dropships was being worn like trophies. Humanity had done something no other species had ever managed, turned its rage into economy. But not everyone on Earth celebrated. There were still those who asked what came next. What happened after the Ilari fell? After there was no one left to punish? Riker's answer was simple. Then we remember. Because he knew, like anyone who ever wore the black armor, that war wasn't just something humans fought. It was something we became. And now, out there in the shattered remains of the Ilari Dominion, the rest of the galaxy was starting to understand that. one system at a time. The halls of Kiril Station were eerily quiet, not because the personnel were gone, but because silence had become a survival instinct. Ilari no longer spoke in tones above a whisper. Their once melodic language, famous for its eloquence and layered syntax, had degraded into staccato bursts, short, clipped, and trembling. Gone were the proud uniforms, the flowing emblems of caste and command. The few that remained wore gray, unmarked fabric. To appear unimportant was the only way to stay alive. Dr. Serix Halloran, one of the highest-rated sociologists of the Ilari Core World Network, sat hunched over a holoconsole inside the deepest level of Kiril Station. He hadn't left this floor in weeks. He hadn't seen sunlight in months. There was no longer a sun to see. Earth had targeted their solar satellites during the first round of orbital sabotage. Half the sector now lived in artificial night. But Serix wasn't studying war logistics. He wasn't looking at casualty figures. He was studying something far more disturbing: behavioral decay. He played a feed, again, from the Shirani's capital evacuation. It showed a crowd of over 10,000 Ilari civilians waiting at the port gates as orbital carriers refused to land. There was no bombing, no visible threat. Just fear. It had spread like a virus. Fights broke out, then stampedes. In a matter of minutes, Ilari were trampling each other, mothers clawing over children, soldiers abandoning protocol. By the end of the footage, only 300 had survived. They weren't killed by humans. They were killed by themselves. Dr. Halloran logged another report. Subject species displaying mass PTSD symptoms on planetary scale. Signs of shared psychotic breakdown. Trigger, Earth aggression model. Methods, psychological warfare, myth construction, forced isolation, information starvation. Conclusion. This is not a war. This is systemic unmaking of identity. He leaned back in his chair, his slender hands shaking as he activated another feed. This one was audio only, intercepted transmissions between two Earth operatives on Voltra 7. The accent was Terran North, male, cold. We don't need to kill them all. Number just enough to make the rest destroy themselves. That was it. 2 sentences, but Serix couldn't stop listening to them, over and over, because in those lines was the terrifying truth of Earth's doctrine. They didn't want victory. They wanted extinction of memory. In the central chamber of Kiril's command, General Avrax, one of the last remaining military leaders with an unbroken chain of command, stared at the message from the tribunal. It was short. No assistance can be offered at this time. Do not engage Earth. Contain the damage. Avrax slammed his clawed hand into the console. Cowards, he growled. We funded their fleets. We protected their colonies. And now when we bleed, they preach non-intervention? His aide said nothing. There was nothing to say. The tribunal wasn't going to help. No one was. The other galactic species had pulled out weeks ago, cutting trade ties, revoking alliances, all to avoid Earth's retaliation crossing over into their territory. One by one, the stars had gone silent. What's the current intelligence on Earth deployments? Avrax finally asked. The aide, trembling, tapped the display. A terrifying chart appeared, showing at least 18 independent Earth factions now operating in Ilari territory. Not unified armies, independent war machines, mercenary groups, rogue fleets, privateers, even outlaw Earth citizens who'd joined the revenge campaigns without government sanction. Some weren't even soldiers, just settlers looking to build on what they called spoils of war. They're not organized, the aide whispered, but they're coordinated, like a swarm. Avrax's blood ran cold. That was worse than unity. You could fight a structured army. You could negotiate with generals. But a swarm? A swarm didn't negotiate. A swarm just devoured. In orbit above Kirill Station, a transmission crackled through unencrypted space. It wasn't a threat. Not officially. Just a message that had been repeating across all Ilari channels for the last 3 days. Nobody knew where it came from. No source, no trace. This is not a war. This is a reckoning. Your stars are fading. Your names will vanish. We are Earth, and we remember. Some said it was propaganda. Others thought it was AI-generated. But Dr. Serix Halloran believed otherwise. He believed it was Keller's voice, the infamous captain who died on Vecra 9. The man who became legend. He had it looped in his earpiece constantly now. He said it helped him understand the human psyche. But in truth, it was driving him insane. Meanwhile, on Earth, Riker stood alone in the EarthGov Memorial Hall, surrounded by 1,000 silent statues of the fallen. Soldiers, civilians, scientists, children, each carved from the ashes of lost colonies. This wasn't just a monument. It was a reminder. We never forget. A young officer approached cautiously, his voice tight. "Sir, message from the Ardent Flame." That was Earth's newest supercarrier, a floating fortress armed to the teeth, equipped with planet-slicer orbital weaponry. It had just reached the edge of Ilari Prime's system. Riker turned slowly. "Report. They're ready to drop the payload. Waiting for your word." Riker didn't answer immediately. He walked up to one of the statues, a little girl, maybe 6 years old. She had no weapon, just a teddy bear in her hand, half melted. The plaque read, "Serena M., age 6, died in the firestorm of Ganymede." Riker stared at her face. "Do you think they'll remember her?" he asked aloud. The officer said nothing. "Do it," Riker said, voice like steel. "Burn the sky." Back on Kirill Station, the stars began to die. It wasn't a poetic phrase. It was literal. The Ilari Prime's sun, a Class B behemoth, began to dim. At first, scientists thought it was a natural anomaly, but when the readings came in, panic overtook the station. The humans had dropped Project Eclipse, an experimental payload designed not to destroy, but to destabilize solar output. It wouldn't just kill Ilari Prime, it would curse it, turn it into a freezing, blackened rock that slowly murdered its population over decades. No explosions, no headlines, just nothing. Serix Halloran finally broke. He tore his console from the wall, screaming as data spilled across the floor. "They're erasing light now," he shrieked. "Do you understand? They're playing with cosmic laws." No one restrained him. No one stopped him. Because they all felt it too. The Ilari were dying, not as a people, but as an idea. In the final hour before blackout, a last transmission was sent from the High Council of Ilari, their voices ragged, desperate. "We surrender, unconditionally. We beg for mercy. Earth, please, please stop." There was no reply, only silence, the kind Earth had mastered. The surrender of the Ilari High Council was transmitted in every known galactic frequency. Across the stars, in quiet alien taverns and derelict listening posts, every species tuned in. Not out of concern, but out of morbid curiosity. Because what came next, no one had ever seen before. Earth didn't respond. Not a single signal, not a single word. They let the message hang in the void like a corpse in the street, not acknowledged, not buried, just there, rotting, for the galaxy to smell. Dr. Serix Halloran sat hunched inside the ruins of Kirill Station's east wing, his face gaunt, eyes cracked with sleepless madness. He kept whispering the words to himself over and over. We begged. We begged. But Earth wasn't listening anymore. It had moved beyond rage, beyond vengeance. Earth had become something more terrifying, indifferent. There is no worse enemy than one who has nothing left to prove. General Avrax paced what remained of the command chamber, the lights flickering like a dying pulse. The room smelled of metal, burnt wiring, and despair. Every officer with rank had either fled or taken their own lives. Some didn't want to be captured. Most couldn't bear the shame of defeat. The Alari had never known defeat. Not like this. "Contact the humans again," Avrax said, his voice like gravel soaked in blood. The technician blinked at him. "General, we've already—" "Again," he barked. "I want every channel broadcasting the same words. We surrender, unconditionally." The technician hesitated, then slowly nodded. Avrax stood in front of the main projection, his uniform torn, rank insignia missing. He looked more like a refugee than a general. But when the cameras came on, he stood tall. "This is General Avrax of the Alari Dominion. We are no longer your enemies. We surrender our fleets, our colonies, our world. We do not ask for mercy. We ask for acknowledgement. Please, respond." Silence. Then static. Then, after 47 seconds, a voice. Male, human. Not Riker, not any known Earth commander. Just someone. That made it worse. "You surrender now? After Ganymede? After Terra 3? After the mothers who burned alive in vacuum and the children who screamed until their lungs froze? We asked for peace once. You didn't listen. Now we don't care what you ask for." The screen went black. Avrax staggered backward, not from the message itself, but from the truth behind it. The Alari had lost more than a war. They had lost relevance. Meanwhile, aboard the Ardent Flame, Earth's deadliest supercarrier, Admiral Sutton reviewed the impact data from Project Eclipse. The calculations were precise. The solar decay was unfolding exactly as predicted. Alari Prime's oceans would begin freezing within 5 days. Agriculture would collapse within 2 weeks. And in less than 4 months, the planet would be a lifeless husk. He looked over at the black, armored figure standing beside him. A revenant operative. No name, no number, just presence. The only thing visible beneath the helmet was a faint red glow where human eyes should have been. "They offered unconditional surrender," Sutton said. The revenant tilted its head. "And we said no." No response. Sutton chuckled. "You know what I hate? People who think Earth wants this, like we enjoyed death." Still no reply. "We don't. We just remember too well, that's all. Pain's the only thing that lasts, after all. Empires fade. Love fades. Pain?" He tapped his temple. "Pain's permanent." Down on Earth, Riker stood on a silent cliff overlooking the wastelands of North America's Old Zone, what used to be Denver before the first orbital strike from the Alari years ago. He often came here alone, where the wind spoke through bones and the sun rarely cut through the ash. A young soldier approached from behind, boots crunching softly in the dirt. "Sir, we've received word." Riker didn't turn. "Let me guess, the Alari are crying." "Yes, sir, offering trade, even reparations." Now he turned, slowly, his stare sharp enough to cut through the atmosphere. "Reparations? From who? The ghosts of their children? The bones of our dead? Let me explain something to you, Corporal." He stepped closer. The wind howled louder. "Reparations are what you give to the living. The Alari don't owe us gold, they owe us extinction." Back in orbit, hundreds of black pods began descending onto Alari Prime. Not soldiers, not bombs, just containers, marked only with Earth's emblem, and a single phrase etched into the side. "Let memory burn." Each pod contained war recordings, audio from screaming children, footage from vaporized cities, biological remnants, charred bones, DNA samples, blood-stained Earth flags, each artifact a relic of pain, dropped like rain upon Ilari's most sacred grounds. Dr. Sarix Halloran was one of the few who watched a full pod playthrough. His assistant vomited. One of the guards went catatonic. Sarix, however, smiled, because now he understood. The war wasn't about control. It was about preservation, not of Earth's power, but of its trauma. A warning carved into every broken world: do not cross Earth. Do not forget Earth. Do not outlive Earth. In the underground shelters of Ilari Prime, civilians huddled around heat coils as the cold crept in. Mothers whispered ancient lullabies, but the children no longer slept. Their dreams were filled with shadows, black armored figures with fire in their eyes. They didn't speak. They didn't scream. They just stared. The nightmares weren't random. Every Ilari child had them now. Earth hadn't just won the war. It had infected their bloodline. In the last surviving broadcast tower of Ilari Prime, a young rebel named Kieran tried sending one final plea, not for peace, not even for mercy, just to be heard. Earth, if you can hear this, please tell us what we did wrong. There was no reply, just static. Then the signal twisted, warped, and one final message slipped through. You existed. The transmission ended. The tower went dark. Across the galaxy, the stars kept spinning. The empires kept building. The races kept trading. But one truth was now carved into every corner of space. You don't come back from a war with Earth. Because Earth doesn't leave you beaten. It leaves you remembering. The last living child of the Ilari high bloodline, a pale girl named Isari, was kept beneath the capital's cryo vaults, hidden beneath layers of stone and steel, as if the depths of the planet could protect her from memory. She was 6 cycles old. Too young to understand war, but just old enough to recognize fear. It clung to her nurses' faces. It filled every breath in the bunker. It dripped from the flickering lights and shuddered in the sleep-deprived eyes of the security teams guarding her. She had never seen the sky. When the vault doors sealed weeks ago, her mother promised her it was for protection. Earth cannot reach you here, she said. But she had said it in that way adults speak when they know they're lying, with a softness meant to bury the truth. Now her mother was gone. So was the entire vault command. And outside that bunker, Ilari Prime was turning into a tomb. The ocean winds had stopped blowing. The sky no longer glowed. The cities above were black silhouettes frozen in the final seconds of collapse. And as the planet's last crops wilted and every reactor failed, the survivors began to do what all dying civilizations do. They turned on each other. It started with resource seizures, riots in the upper domes, government elite vaults being stormed by soldiers who no longer obeyed. Then came the rituals, a return to ancient myths, desperate people worshipping anything that might protect them from Earth's wrath. But Earth wasn't a god. It was a lesson, and lessons, when unlearned, demand repetition. Back in orbit, Earth's fleet wasn't even firing anymore. There was nothing left to destroy. Instead, they broadcast one image on a loop to every corner of the galaxy, every frequency, every translation protocol, a single boot print in Martian dust. The caption below it read, "We are the children of war. And we remember who made us orphans." It became the most broadcasted image in galactic history, not because it was beautiful, but because it was terrifying. In the ruins of what used to be the Ilari Supreme Council chamber, a group of scholars huddled in candlelight. Books surrounded them, real ones, not datapads or archives. Physical books, written before space travel, before the Ilari Dominion rose to prominence. Dr. Harnath, a philosopher exiled from the Ilari Academic Corps years earlier for pessimism, now held a place of power in the minds of the broken. He sat cross-legged in a torn ceremonial robe, surrounded by young students who looked more like corpses than intellectuals. "They never wanted our extinction," he said. "That would have been mercy." "Then what do they want?" a student whispered. "To make sure no one ever saves us." That's what Earth had done differently. Other species waged war to conquer, to enslave, to absorb. But Earth waged war to sever. They weren't trying to rebuild. They were pulling out the roots, because in Earth's eyes, the Alari weren't opponents. They were originators, the ones who started it all. In a forgotten comms facility deep in the Harnack Range, an automated system kicked online, a backup, dormant for decades, powered by geothermal veins the Alari never fully mapped. It triggered without human interference, detecting planetary instability. The system wasn't Alari-made, it was Earth tech. Inside the relay chamber, a hologram activated. A face appeared, old, stern, unmistakably human. Not Riker, not Keller, someone else. Unknown. Protocol AL-13. Triggered upon critical collapse of Alari planetary infrastructure. Message follows. The face leaned forward, eyes like dying stars. If you're hearing this, you've lost more than a war. You've lost the future. You lit the match, and we became the fire. There will be no occupation, no peace, no offers. What you did to our people, we returned. Multiplied. Engraved into your soil, you will find no human among you. Not because we're gone, but because you are. The message ended. The relay self-destructed 30 seconds later. No trace. No evidence. Only memory. Elsewhere, aboard the Revenant-class stealth frigate, Sable Ash, a new commander took her seat in the cockpit. Call sign, Wraith. Female. Eyes surgically altered for night vision, bones reinforced for zero-G combat. She didn't speak often, didn't need to. She wasn't here to lead. She was here to cleanse. Her target wasn't military, it was cultural. The Sable Ash had been sent to locate and destroy every remnant of Alari art, language archives, religious temples, and memory vaults. She understood her mission clearly. Eradicate their history. Make the galaxy forget them. Some in Earth's high command argued it was excessive, but the Revenant program didn't answer to EarthGov anymore. They answered to legacy. Meanwhile, in a distant asteroid field bordering the ruins of Alari's outer colonies, a scavenger ship stumbled upon a drifting life pod. The hull was Alari-made, but the markings inside were foreign, human language etched into the walls with blood and a broken blade. The message was fragmented but legible. They told me we were the superior species, that Earth was a relic. I watched my brothers melt in their armor. I watched a human walk through radiation with no gear, no mask, just fire in his eyes. He didn't kill me. He looked at me and said, "This is the price of arrogance." I believed in my empire. I believed in Alari supremacy. Now I believe in ghosts. If you find this, don't look for Earth. Just pray they don't look for you. The scavenger ship left the pod untouched. They didn't even take its black box. Some things were better left drifting. In Earth's orbital archive station, a clerk was finishing a report for civilian consumption. It was a short article, sanitized for public release. Earth's civilians weren't given details of the war. They didn't know what had really happened. They were told Earth had survived, that the bad aliens were gone, that we were safe again. But the clerk, a quiet man with a tired face, stared at the classified files as he prepared the summary. He saw the raw footage. He saw the recordings. He saw children's laughter echoing in oxygen-depleted shelters, their joy slowly turning into silence. He saw the executions, swift, unsympathetic, surgical. He saw the artificial intelligence we created not for convenience, but for revenge. AI that learned how to mimic Alari voices to lure their own into kill zones. He didn't file the real report. He deleted it and poured a drink because he knew the truth. Earth didn't survive the war. It became it. And now, as decades passed and the stars cooled, the galactic archives had no living records of the Alari. Their systems were uninhabited. Their artifacts were gone. Even their name had been reduced to a whisper. In the Academy of Galactic Relations, a young alien student once asked, "Professor, what happened to the species who challenged Earth?" The professor, old and cautious, looked around, then lowered his voice. They were erased. By who? The professor looked the student in the eye. By themselves, after Earth reminded them who they were. And then he said no more. Because even now, even after the war was long over, the galaxy still remembered the silence, and Earth still watched. It had been 50 years since the Alari vanished from the stars, not surrendered, not destroyed in one final blaze of glory, just gone. Their space became known as the Dead Belt, a stretch of hundreds of uninhabited systems where no comms signals echoed, no vessels traveled, and no salvage crews dared enter. Their structures remained, broken, abandoned, still drifting in gravity-locked orbits. Their planets were still there too, frozen and sunless. Time hadn't erased the physical remnants. But time didn't need to. Memory had already done the job. On the neutral station of Graal Point, a young alien researcher named Tova sat before a glowing star map, his six-fingered hand trembling as he highlighted yet another derelict Ilari world. Graal Point wasn't governed by any one empire. It was a haven for the curious, the heretical, the reckless. Tova had grown up hearing stories of Earth, not from history books, but whispered around campfires and passed down by elders who spoke like the humans were still watching. He remembered what his father once told him before bed. "Don't stare too long at the blue star. They say Earth can feel it when you do." Tova was a scientist now, an academic. He didn't believe in superstition, but he believed in fear. And fear, he'd learned, often had its roots in something real. The Ilari were his obsession, not because he admired them, but because no one could explain their disappearance. Every archive that once mentioned their name had been corrupted or erased. No one traded in their relics. No one admitted to visiting their ruins. In fact, it had become illegal in many sectors to even say their name aloud. Yet here Tova sat, thousands of light years from Earth, risking everything to study the species that once ruled a third of the galactic lanes and vanished like ash on the wind. "Why did Earth do it?" he asked aloud. He wasn't looking for an answer, but a voice came anyway. They didn't do it because of what the Ilari were. They did it because of what they represented. Tova turned sharply. An old man stood behind him, cloaked in a patchwork uniform that bore no insignia, but one that felt human in its posture. He looked too old to be there, his breathing shallow, his voice gravel. "Who are you?" Tova asked. The old man gave a thin smile. "Just someone who remembers." Tova felt a cold knot form in his chest. "Are you from Earth?" The man didn't answer directly. "The galaxy thinks we erased the Ilari out of vengeance. They think it was rage, revenge. But that's not the full truth. You know what Earth really feared?" "What?" "Repetition." Tova blinked. "They didn't just kill the Ilari for what they did. They erased them so that no one else would ever dare to do it again. That's why there's no archives, no stories, no relics, just silence. Earth didn't want justice. Earth wanted an example." He stepped closer. "You ever seen a solar system rot from within? You ever step on a planet where grass refuses to grow because the soil remembers who lived there?" Tova swallowed. "No." The man's eyes flashed. "Then don't. Curiosity is what got the Ilari killed. Curiosity is what made them dig too deep into a planet they didn't understand." "Which one?" "Earth." Before Tova could ask more, the man was gone. Just slipped into the crowd, like a ghost. No name, no ID, no trace. But Tova didn't chase him. He just stared at the star map. And for the first time in his life, he deselected the Alari systems from his navigation logs, not because he was afraid of punishment, but because something primal inside him wanted to be forgotten. Across the galaxy, this behavior had become common. Entire school curriculums omitted the war. Children weren't taught about the Alari. Maps were redrawn, histories revised, and yet, Earth's name remained. Every species knew it. Every government feared it. Not because Earth ruled the galaxy. It didn't. It didn't demand tribute. It didn't plant colonies. It didn't expand. Earth watched, and that was worse. Inside the ruins of the Tribunal's old hall, now a museum of political failure, a plaque stood at the center of the central dome. It read, "The price of underestimating silence." Beneath it, a quote was etched in every major language. They looked at Earth and saw a world still healing from its own scars. They assumed that made us vulnerable. What they failed to understand is that Earth's pain doesn't weaken it. It weaponizes it. Unknown human commander. No one knew who had placed the plaque there. No one had dared to remove it. In the upper echelons of Earth's shadow agencies, programs so black their names weren't even spoken aloud, a different question began to take shape. Not, what comes next, but who comes next, because Earth hadn't just destroyed an empire, it had set precedent. And now every new race crawling from their homeworlds, building faster-than-light engines, seeking expansion, had to ask themselves one question. What will Earth tolerate? And the answer, passed through decades of whispered fear, was always the same. Nothing. Back on Earth, in a private citadel carved into the icy cliffs of Greenland, Riker, older now, slow but still sharp, sat alone in a room filled with names. Not of heroes, but of targets. He didn't run EarthGov anymore. He didn't have to. His name was never spoken, his image never broadcast, but his voice, his directives, still moved fleets like gravity. He looked at a screen displaying Ilari Prime, or what remained of it. A lifeless rock now, frozen solid. And he smiled. Not because he enjoyed it, but because the job was done. The galaxy was afraid, and Earth, finally, was alone again. Just the way it was supposed to be. It began, as many things do, in silence. Ilari Prime, now officially designated as Sector Null 1, spun slowly beneath a black sun. There were no weather patterns, no tides, no cities, just ice. The ruins of once beautiful architecture, spires and monuments and crystalline towers, now jutted out of the frost like broken bones. The wind didn't howl here, it whispered, as if even the atmosphere remembered what it had witnessed. Orbiting above in low geosynchronous drift was a lone satellite. Human-made. Its signal was long dead, its casing scorched by centuries of cosmic debris. But it still functioned. It still watched. That was Earth's final cruelty, not destruction, but observation. Let them die cold, but never forgotten. Far beyond the frozen graveyard of Ilari space, on a planet named Varrock II, a new species had begun its climb toward space. The Sarathi, an amphibious reptilian race, had recently launched their first orbital ring, begun experimenting with fusion drives, and announced their intention to make peaceful contact with higher civilizations. They didn't know. They didn't remember. Not yet. Within Earth's long-range monitoring array, deep inside the AI-controlled outpost Sentinel's wake, a signal pinged. Not from Varrock II, but from an automated Earth-run relay orbiting their star. A red flag. Standard protocol. Species. Sarathi status. Pre-FTL civilization. Activity. Radio orbital launches. Increasing threat assessment. Neutral protocol. Suggestion. Observation only. The AI hesitated. Observation only. That was the new Earth policy. Observe, record. Wait. Never engage unless provoked. Never speak unless spoken to. Never reveal unless challenged. But that's the thing about power. Eventually, it has to remind the world why it should be feared. Back on Earth, the planet had changed. Not rebuilt. Evolved. Cities floated above oceans. The skies were clean. The scars of the old wars, nuclear winters, climate collapses, the early colonization disasters had all been buried beneath layers of precision architecture and collective amnesia. But in a cold mountain fortress above the Alaskan Divide, a classroom of children was being taught a lesson the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. The teacher, a tall man with silver in his beard and dark fire in his eyes, pulled down a map, an old one, before the HFY War, before the Tribunal, before silence. "Who here can tell me why the stars beyond this line," he said, tracing a rough semicircle into the map's edge, "are marked with black instead of white?" A few hands raised. One girl answered, "Because those systems are empty." The teacher smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, not empty. Hollow." Another boy tried. "Is it because of the war?" "Which war?" the teacher asked. A silence passed, and then the boy said what no one else dared to. "The one we don't talk about." The teacher nodded slowly. "That's right. The war we don't talk about. The war that made us what we are now. The war that turned Earth into a mirror, showing every other species exactly what we're capable of." He stepped away from the map and looked at the class. "Do you know why no one comes back from a war with Earth?" The room held its breath. "Because we don't just destroy your armies, we destroy your history, your myth, your memory." He leaned forward. "And when the last of you is gone, we rewrite your name into a whisper that even the void forgets." The children didn't respond. They didn't need to. It was enough just to know, enough to understand what being born on Earth really meant. It meant never needing to fight, because everyone already feared what would happen if you did. Back in the Dead Belt, where no ships flew and no signals traveled, a single drone, cloaked in solar camouflage, landed on the ice of HFY Prime. It drilled into the crust, collected samples of silence, and buried a black box deep beneath the surface. Inside that box was a single entry, written by a man long dead. Captain Dax Keller, his final message, uncensored, unfiltered human. "I'm not sorry for what we did. I need that to be clear. I'm not sorry we made them disappear. I'm not sorry we made them remember us in their nightmares. I'm not sorry we scorched their name from every archive, because they started this. They wanted this. But I will say this. There was a moment, just one, when I stood over the ruins of a temple and saw a child staring at me. She wasn't crying, she wasn't running, she just stared, and in that moment I realized something. We didn't just destroy the HFY. We became what they feared most. They thought we were animals. We showed them we were worse. We were human. That box was not for the HFY. It was for us, a reminder. Centuries passed. The galaxy moved on. New species rose. New alliances were formed. Old wounds were smoothed over with time and ignorance. But Earth remained a silent anomaly. A planet that neither traded nor conquered, but whose name hung in the air like gravity. No one visited Earth uninvited. No one mapped its inner systems. And no one, ever again, declared war on humanity. Not because of what Earth could do now, but because of what it had already done once. In the final days of the galactic cycle, a young archivist on a distant station came across an encrypted data cube in an abandoned cargo crate. It was unmarked, unlabeled, unreadable by most systems. But he cracked it. Inside were videos, logs, warnings, testimonies. He watched for 7 hours straight. And when he finally looked up, his eyes wide, skin pale, heart racing, he whispered the name he found over and over again in those ancient records. A name no one had dared speak for a generation. HFY, and then he whispered the one word that came next in every recording, a word that had outlived the empire it destroyed, a word that now echoed in his own mind like prophecy. Earth.